The silence of the plain shattered as fire leapt across brittle grass, tongues of orange clawing at the sky without mercy. Emma said, "The herd must move, or we will be swallowed whole." James felt the earth vibrate beneath frantic hooves, fear pounding louder than thunder. The wind dragged smoke across the horizon, black veils smothering the sun's glow. Flames split into furious lines, chasing shadows that broke apart like frightened birds. Charlotte stumbled, eyes wide, breath sharp with ash. Michael shouted, "Run, don't stop, the fire takes everything." The youngest calf tripped, trembling, legs refusing command, a fragile symbol of innocence staring at the inferno. Emma pressed forward, heart tearing at the sound of the calf's cry, torn between instinct and love. Nature had struck without warning, and survival demanded cruel choices. In that instant, safety felt like an illusion burning with the grass. The ground cracked with heat as the herd pressed forward, shadows stretching under the dying light. Charlotte said, "The air burns my lungs," her voice torn with panic. James gritted his teeth, urging the animals onward, his own legs heavy with exhaustion. Sparks drifted like falling stars, searing skin as they touched. The youngest calf whimpered, staggering in the dust, while Emma whispered, "Stay strong, little one." Michael's gaze cut across the smoke, searching for a path untouched by fire. Around them, the inferno roared, a predator without teeth or claws yet merciless in its hunger. Nature's law echoed in every crackle: survive or be erased. The smoke grew heavier, strangling the horizon until sky and earth blurred into shadow. Emma gasped, her throat raw. "We can't outpace it forever." Michael's stride slowed, weight pressing him down as if the fire itself gripped his shoulders. James dragged the calf by its neck rope, his jaw clenched against its resistance. Charlotte's eyes darted wildly, her fear infectious, her hands trembling as she clutched her chest. The roar of flames became an endless drumbeat, pounding against their ears. Each step forward felt stolen from the grave. Survival was no longer a promise, only a fleeting bargain with time. The fire broke into two walls, a fork of death stretching ahead. James shouted, "It's trapping us!" His voice cracked with dread as the herd faltered, hooves scattering loose earth. Michael forced his way to the front, muscles straining, sweat glistening like molten glass. Charlotte's scream pierced the chaos, echoing into the blackened sky. Emma grabbed the calf's rope, dragging it with desperate strength, her body shaking with effort. The inferno closed its circle, light flashing like cruel lightning. The herd cried out in unison, a chorus of panic. The world became a cage of fire, survival slipping away like smoke. The ground rumbled as the herd surged, driven by terror, into the narrow gap between fire lines. Emma said, "This is our only chance." Her voice cracked but carried defiance. James pushed forward, eyes wild, dragging the calf whose cries pierced the roar. Michael swung his arm, clearing stragglers, his strength pulling others to safety. Charlotte's sobs broke into gasps as she stumbled in the smoke. The flames roared on both sides, heat blistering skin, air searing lungs. Nature demanded their surrender, yet still they fought. With every step, the question burned: who would make it through, and who would fall? Dawn broke with an eerie silence, the smoke of last night's fire lingering like a ghost across the horizon. Emma's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, her body aching from the desperate escape. James crouched near the calf, his calloused hand brushing its trembling flank as he whispered, "You're safe, little one, stay with me." Charlotte stood apart, her eyes wet and distant, torn between relief and dread, while Michael scanned the plain, shoulders tense, ever the protector. The herd clustered in uneven circles, flanks glistening with sweat, eyes still wide with fear, their low moans echoing in the morning air. The fire had spared them for now, but Emma knew nature's mercy was always fleet. She said, "Every step forward matters, or the flames will chase us again." The calf staggered upright, fragile legs quivering, a living reminder of why they endured. Beneath the endless sky, the bond between them deepened, forged by the fire's shadow, anchored in fragile hope. The herd shifted uneasily, hooves stamping at unseen threats, while smoke curled low across the ground, thick as memory. James whispered, "They remember the fire. They fear it still." Charlotte stepped closer, wrapping her arms around herself, her voice barely audible. "I feel like it's not over." Michael tightened his jaw, every movement deliberate, his eyes cutting over the horizon as though danger might rise at any moment. Emma pressed her hand to the calf's trembling neck, grounding herself in its fragility. The weight of responsibility pressed down heavier than ash. She thought of all that could be lost if the calf fell, if any of them faltered. Their survival was more than endurance. It was defiance against inevitability. Emma said, "We move together, we keep the little one alive, or none of this means anything." In the still morning air, the herd's fear mirrored their own, silent voices bound to fragile destiny. The sky lightened, but the air stayed heavy, the smell of char and dust choking every breath. Emma's voice broke through the silence. "He's weak, but he must walk, or he won't survive." James pulled at the calf's rope gently, coaxing it forward with patience born of desperation. Charlotte pressed a trembling hand to her lips, watching with guilt as if the calf's struggle mirrored her own helplessness. Michael moved alongside, his body a shield, always watching, always prepared to fight what the world might throw at them next. The herd shuffled forward slowly, hooves crunching brittle earth, heads lowered. Emma's heart ached with the sight, every step a reminder of fragility, every stumble a spark of fear. She whispered to herself, "If he falls, hope falls with him." The calf stumbled again, catching itself clumsily, yet pressing onward. That fragile defiance gave her strength to believe survival was still possible. Midday sun cut through the haze, heat pressing down like a hand against their backs. The herd slowed, their bodies sagging under exhaustion. Charlotte stumbled and whispered, "I can't keep this pace." James steadied her with a rough hand, gritting his teeth. "You can't stop. We've come too far." Emma's gaze fell on the calf again, its small sides heaving with each step, ribs visible, legs quivering. She clenched her fists, her voice trembling but firm. "He carries more than his own weight. He carries us all." Michael walked ahead, carving a path through scrub, sweat pouring down his temples, shoulders square with grim resolve. The land stretched endless and unforgiving. No shade, no mercy. Still, they pressed forward, bound not by choice but by necessity. Emma thought of the fire, how it left nothing but ruin, and knew they had only one answer: to keep moving, even when the earth itself seemed to push them back. As the afternoon stretched, shadows lengthened across the plain, and the herd's weary bodies slowed, almost to a halt. The calf collapsed suddenly, its legs folding under the weight of survival. Emma dropped beside it, her voice breaking, "No, not now, not here." James knelt on the other side, his rough hands lifting the fragile body, desperation in every movement. Charlotte cried out, stumbling closer, whispering, "We can't lose him, he's all we have left." Michael turned back, his expression hardened by grief, yet his arms moved with strength, lifting calf and rope together, dragging it forward. Around them, the herd bellowed softly, as though echoing their despair. Emma felt the weight of a decision pressing into her chest: abandon weakness, or carry it until it killed them. She shook her head fiercely, whispering, "He is not weakness, he is the reason we endure." The bond was sealed, not of convenience but of survival's deepest truth. The sky darkened with a heavy storm cloud rolling from the west, its belly swollen with menace. Emma tightened her grip on the calf's rope, whispering, "We must not slow." The herd stirred uneasily, hooves striking the ground with nervous rhythm. James spat into the dust, muttering, "The fire was not the end, the storm is another test." Charlotte's arms wrapped tighter around her chest, trembling as thunder cracked like a whip overhead. Michael lifted his head, eyes hard, scanning the horizon for shelter that did not exist. The land stretched barren, flat and cruel, giving no refuge. The calf stumbled, its frail body shuddering, while Emma bent low to urge it on. She said, "If the storm catches us here, it will drown us in fear before water even falls." The sky rumbled again, promising not rain but judgment. Nature rose now as another predator, silent, waiting for the weakest to collapse. The first drops fell like stones, cold and sharp, darkening the earth in quick spots. James groaned, his shoulders sagging under weight of exhaustion. Emma's face lifted to the sky, rain streaking across her soot-stained skin, and she said, "It will not wash us clean. It will bury us if we falter." Charlotte stumbled, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her sobs muffled by the roar of growing wind. Michael pressed forward with raw strength, his arm cutting through the curtain of rain, his voice like steel. "Keep moving, don't surrender to the sky." The herd surged as lightning split the horizon, their cries blending with thunder. The calf slipped in mud, legs splaying awkwardly, a cry breaking from its throat. Emma bent low, pulling fiercely, her body straining against both rope and storm. Hope felt thin, fragile, nearly washed away, yet still alive in the pounding of their hearts. The storm deepened into chaos, thunder shaking the ground as lightning carved jagged scars across the sky. The herd scattered in panic, hooves pounding mud like war drums. Emma screamed, "Stay together!" her voice ripped away by wind. James lunged toward the calf as it slipped again, his arms straining to hold it upright. Charlotte fell to her knees, mud streaking her dress, her sobs drowned by the downpour. Michael towered near, his body a wall against the storm, forcing the animals back into line. Fear clawed through every breath, as though the storm itself was alive, hunting them. Emma pressed her forehead against the calf's wet hide, whispering, "You will not fall, not while I breathe." But the storm laughed in thunder, mocking their struggle. The plain had become a battlefield, their enemy the sky itself, relentless and merciless, demanding they fight against drowning despair. By nightfall the storm broke into sheets of freezing rain, the sky pouring its wrath without pause. Emma's voice cracked, "If we don't find higher ground, we drown here." James staggered under the calf's weight, his arms trembling, yet he refused to let go. Charlotte followed, her eyes empty, her steps slow, like a ghost pulled by duty. Michael pointed toward a distant ridge, his voice cutting through the storm. "There! Move!" The herd bellowed in dissonance, their cries echoing like broken horns. The plain flooded quickly, water rising to ankles, threatening knees. Emma's heart pounded, every drop like fire against her skin, every second another trial. She whispered fiercely, "We'll rise or we vanish." James coughed hard, mud splattering his lips, yet his grip tightened. The storm's rage grew louder, relentless, as though it sought to erase their existence entirely in the flood's embrace. The ridge loomed closer, a shadowed salvation above the drowning plain. Emma's muscles screamed as she hauled the rope, her chest burning with every breath. James staggered beside her, his arms wrapped around the calf's trembling body, his jaw clenched in silent fury. Charlotte dragged herself forward, mud clinging heavy, her lips cracked from cries lost in rain. Michael reached the slope first, pulling animals upward with brutal determination. He roared, "Climb, all of you!" Thunder cracked above, as though the sky split open in anger. Emma shoved Charlotte forward, then turned back for James, her voice fierce. "Don't let go of him, not now." The herd climbed desperately, hooves scraping wet rock, their cries a chorus of raw survival. At last they reached higher ground, soaked and shivering, but alive. Emma fell to her knees, tears lost in the rain, whispering, "We endure." The storm raged on, but they had stolen another day. The storm faded by dawn, leaving the ridge scarred with mud and silence. Emma's eyes followed the horizon, her body still shaking when she noticed movement across the distant plain. Wolves, thin, sharp-eyed, relentless, emerged from smoke shadows, their bodies lean from hunger. James cursed under his breath, whispering, "They've been waiting for us." Charlotte stumbled back, fear stealing her voice, her gaze fixed on their yellow eyes gleaming through mist. Michael's jaw hardened, his voice low. "They are not scavengers tonight, they are hunters." The herd shifted uneasily, sensing what humans already knew. The fire and storm had driven predators closer, hunger sharpening every step. Emma whispered fiercely. The fire was not the enemy, it flushed them toward us. The revelation struck like lightning. Survival had been a trap, driving prey and predator together. Nature had conspired, not in cruelty, but inevitability. The truth: they had not escaped danger, they had only been herded into it. The herd shuddered, bodies pressing together, eyes rolling with terror. James muttered, "They smell our weakness." The calf bleated softly, its small voice a beacon to predators. Emma's heart sank as realization bloomed. This fragile life she clung to was also the signal of their doom. Charlotte whispered brokenly, "We should leave him," her words trembling like glass about to shatter. Emma's face hardened, her voice slicing the silence. "He is not a burden. He is proof we endure." Michael stood at her side, eyes fixed on the wolves drawing closer, growls carried by wind, low and vibrating. He said, "We hold the ridge, or we fall with him." The pack circled below, patient, cunning, knowing hunger made them stronger than desperation. The hidden truth tore deeper. The calf's survival might cost them all. Emma clenched the rope, refusing the choice, whispering, "No, he lives, and so do we." The wolves climbed slowly, their paws steady on slick earth, eyes unblinking. James hissed, "They're not rushing. They want us to break first." Charlotte shook her head, backing away, her lips trembling with silent prayers. Michael planted his feet, his voice a command, "Do not move, stand tall." The herd moaned, their cries deep and low, carrying the weight of dread. Emma pulled the calf close, pressing her cheek to its damp hide, whispering, "Stay with me, little one." Then a chilling thought struck. These wolves were not strangers. Their matriarch bore a scar across her muzzle, one Emma recognized from past winters. She remembered watching the predator fight for her own starving litter. Emma whispered, "She hunts for her children." The revelation cut deep, twisting fear into pity, yet it sharpened the danger. Predator and prey were bound by the same desperation. Both carried young that demanded survival. Thunder growled faintly in the distance, echo of the storm gone by, as wolves formed a crescent. Emma's voice broke, "She fights for her own as we fight for ours." James snapped, "Compassion won't stop teeth." Charlotte cried, "Then what hope do we have?" Michael's steady voice cut through panic, "Hope is not choice, it is fight." The matriarch snarled, her breath misting in cold dawn air, muscles taut with hunger. Emma's mind raced, torn between empathy and survival. She whispered fiercely to the calf, "You will not be her sacrifice." Wolves advanced in steps, each one a silent drumbeat of inevitability. The herd shifted, pressed tight, eyes wide as the line between predator and prey blurred into a mirror of need. The hidden truth became unbearable. Every life fought for something beyond itself. Emma clenched the rope tighter, her hands bleeding against coarse fibers, refusing to surrender. The standoff stretched into unbearable silence, the air thick with hunger and fear. Emma's voice trembled yet carried steel. "We endure not because it is easy, but because it is demanded." James shifted closer, his body shielding her and the calf. Charlotte's tears glistened in dawn's light, yet her voice broke through. "Then, let us endure together." Michael raised his arms wide, shouting at the wolves, a raw challenge, "You will not have them." The matriarch's eyes met Emma's across the space. Two mothers, two guardians, locked in battle of necessity. For a heartbeat, neither moved, as though the world itself held its breath. Then the wolves lowered their heads, muscles rippling, preparing to strike. Emma braced, pulling the calf close, her heart hammering. The truth was undeniable. There was no cruelty, no malice, only survival. But in survival's cost, something would break. Nature's balance demanded sacrifice, and the moment had arrived. The wolves lunged without warning, a blur of teeth and muscle against the herd's wall of panic. Emma yanked the calf close, shouting, "Hold the line." James surged forward, fists clenched around a broken branch, swinging with fury. Charlotte screamed, stumbling behind Emma, her body trembling with terror. Michael roared, his powerful frame striking against the first wolf, forcing it back with raw strength. The herd exploded in chaos, hooves hammering earth, cries echoing like thunder. Wolves darted between legs, snapping at flanks, driving panic deeper. Emma's heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst, yet her hands refused to release the rope. She whispered to the calf, "Stay alive, you must." The matriarch wolf circled, her eyes locked with Emma's, cunning and relentless. The battle was not of hatred but survival, each side clinging to the only truth that mattered: endure, no matter the cost. The matriarch sprang, her scarred muzzle snapping inches from Emma's arm. Emma jerked back, dragging the calf, her voice breaking, "Not him, not now." James slammed his branch across another wolf, splinters flying, his body shaking from the impact. Charlotte cried out as a wolf snapped at her leg, terror freezing her in place. Michael charged, tackling the predator aside, his roar echoing louder than thunder. Blood streaked the ground, animal and human mingling, painting survival's cruel canvas. Emma pressed her body against the calf, shielding it with every ounce of strength, her breath ragged, her resolve steel. The wolves circled tighter, emboldened by hunger, relentless in their rhythm. Emma whispered again, almost a prayer, "Endure, endure." The matriarch's eyes burned with both fury and necessity. A mother fighting a mother, survival mirrored and magnified. In that moment, Emma knew, to save one life, another must fall. The herd stampeded, hooves slamming like drums, scattering wolves but crushing allies in chaos. James shouted, "Stay together," his voice shredded by fear. Charlotte fell, her body sprawled in mud, eyes wide with shock as wolves surged closer. Emma leapt, grabbing her arm with one hand while the other clung to the calf's rope. She screamed, "Get up, you can't stop now." Michael dragged two animals forward, shoving them to safety, but blood streaked his arm where teeth had torn. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall, refusing to yield. Wolves darted in and out, striking where weakness showed, pressing harder each second. The matriarch lunged again, her jaws striking rope, tearing fibers apart. Emma's hands bled as she clutched tighter, refusing to release. The rope strained, frayed, ready to snap like her own body. The storm was gone, the fire was memory, but this moment was war, raw, desperate, merciless. The rope snapped, fibers whipping Emma's palms, leaving her gasping. The calf staggered free, its thin legs slipping on wet stone. Wolves surged, jaws wide, hunger blazing. Emma threw herself forward, her scream tearing through air. "No!" James barreled into one predator, fists slamming with wild fury, his body a shield of rage. Charlotte stumbled toward the calf, her trembling arms outstretched despite fear. Michael grunted as another wolf tore into his leg, yet he did not fall, his body unyielding as stone. The matriarch lunged at the calf, jaws clamping down on air as Emma collided with her, flesh against fur, desperation against instinct. Time fractured, every sound stretched into eternity. The herd's cries, the wolves' growls, the pounding of hearts. In that chaos, Emma realized there was no winning, only surviving long enough to matter. She whispered to herself, "If one must fall, let it be me." The ridge echoed with roars, cries, and the wet sound of survival's cost. Emma wrestled the matriarch, teeth flashing inches from her throat, her muscles burning as she held the beast back. James screamed her name, his fists bloodied, but he could not reach her in time. Charlotte clutched the calf, tears streaming, her body shaking as she pulled it close. Michael roared as he tore another wolf away, his strength carved from pain itself. Emma's eyes locked once more with the matriarchs, two guardians of fragile futures, bound by the same brutal truth. For a heartbeat, time stilled, both refusing surrender. Then the herd surged forward, trampling wolves, scattering them into shadows. The matriarch wrenched free, retreating with eyes still burning into Emma's. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breaths. Emma collapsed, hands raw, voice cracked as she whispered, "We endure." They had survived, but victory tasted like ash, because the cost was far from over. The ridge lay quiet at dawn, littered with mud, blood, and trampled grass. Emma sat motionless, her hands raw and trembling, the calf pressed close against her side. James paced a short distance away, his jaw tight, his shirt streaked crimson where wolves had bitten. Charlotte knelt in the dirt, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes hollow as though she had left herself somewhere in the storm. Michael leaned heavily against a stone, his chest rising with shallow breaths, blood trailing down his leg. The herd grazed nervously nearby, their bodies bruised but alive, their cries subdued. The silence was deafening, pressing against their ears, forcing them to acknowledge the cost. Emma whispered to the calf, "You are still here, and because of that, so are we." Her words shook, not in weakness, but in truth. They had endured, yet in surviving, they had been carved into something unrecognizable by nature's hand. The herd pressed onward as the sun rose, their steps uneven, their heads lowered. James walked at their flank, his movements stiff but deliberate, his eyes scanning constantly for more shadows. Charlotte clung to Emma's side, her fear no longer frantic but dull, like an ache that would never leave. Michael limped forward, his stride heavy, each step a battle against pain. Emma led the calf at the front, her body upright despite exhaustion, her rope gripped with bleeding hands. She whispered to it, "Every step is defiance, every breath a victory." The plain stretched ahead, barren and endless, marked by the scars of fire and storm. Their journey was not freedom, but continuation. Survival had not promised peace, only the right to move again. The cost of that right weighed on them all, yet none dared stop. They walked, because not walking meant surrender, and surrender was not an option. By midday, the heat bore down mercilessly, pressing sweat into wounds, turning dust into choking air. Emma's voice cracked, "Don't falter now." James grunted, his face carved with lines of fatigue, yet he did not break pace. Charlotte wiped her tear-streaked cheeks, her gaze falling on the calf's fragile legs as it stumbled, then rose again. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "He is stronger than we are." Michael forced his steps forward, every movement dragging pain behind him like a chain. The herd moved slowly, yet with each step they stayed together, united not by choice but by necessity. The land mocked them with silence, offering no shelter, no water, no relief. Emma pressed her lips against the calf's ear, whispering, "You will see another night." Her words were both promise and lie, but they pushed her onward. In the brutal sunlight, endurance became their only form of resistance. As evening fell, the horizon burned red, reflecting not fire but the weight of memory. Emma slowed, her body trembling as she whispered, "The night will not wait for us." James steadied her shoulder, his eyes softer now, though his face remained hardened. Charlotte's steps faltered, her voice carrying a faint tremor. "I still hear the wolves, even when it's quiet." Michael turned his head sharply, his expression grim. "They'll return if we grow weak." The herd shuffled into a loose circle, their cries low, their bodies pressing close for safety. The calf collapsed into Emma's lap, its small chest rising weakly, its eyes half closed. Emma stroked its damp hide, whispering, "You are the reason we fight." In the dim glow, the world felt fragile, suspended between despair and defiance. For a brief moment, the silence was not cruel. It was mercy, thin but real. A pause before nature's next demand. The night grew cold, stars sharp against black sky, silence broken only by labored breaths. Emma lay beside the calf, her hand resting over its fragile ribs, counting each shallow rise and fall. James sat nearby, sharpening a broken branch, his face locked in quiet fury, knowing predators always returned. Charlotte whispered softly, her voice like a broken prayer, "Let this be enough. Let us have tomorrow." Michael's silhouette loomed against starlight, his eyes scanning shadows, body rigid with vigilance despite wounds. The herd dozed in restless shifts, their forms trembling as though still chased by fire and storm. Emma closed her eyes briefly, her voice cracked. "We endure, even if endurance is all we have left." The night swallowed her words, carrying them across the plain like smoke. In that silence, one truth settled deep. Survival was not triumph, but inevitability. They had not won. They had simply not yet lost. The dawn arrived without songbirds, only silence draped heavy across the plain. Emma rose slowly, her body stiff, every muscle torn by yesterday's fight. James walked the herd forward, his jaw set, his eyes red with sleeplessness. Charlotte trailed close, her lips pressed shut, her face pale and hollow. Michael limped heavily at the rear, his breath shallow but his watch unbroken. The calf stumbled but did not fall, its fragile legs carrying it forward through dust and shadow. Emma whispered, "Every step you take is proof against the night." The herd moved in uneven rhythm, yet together they carved a fragile path. The world seemed to pause, waiting, listening. In that stillness, Emma felt the fire, storm, and wolves echoing behind them, shadows etched into their bones. They had survived, but survival was not release. It was a reminder, nature forgets nothing, and tomorrow would demand again. The land stretched empty, burned by fire, scarred by storm, haunted by wolves. James muttered under his breath, "The plain is endless." Charlotte replied softly, "It feels like walking inside a memory that will not end." Emma pressed onward, her eyes locked on the calf, each step a vow unspoken. Michael staggered but did not falter, his strength now carved entirely from will. The herd moved with them, their bodies weakened, yet still their hooves struck rhythm into the earth. Emma whispered, "We are ghosts carrying fire inside." The wind shifted, carrying faint cries. Perhaps echo, perhaps warning, perhaps the voices of the fallen. Charlotte clutched Emma's arm, fear in her eyes. "Do you hear them too?" Emma nodded but did not slow. The plain was silent, yet the air carried memory heavier than sound. Every breath was survival, every heartbeat another defiance of nature's demand. By midday, the sun blazed overhead, and the herd slowed to a crawl. James shouted, frustration cracking through exhaustion, "We can't keep this pace." Charlotte stumbled, her voice trembling. Then what choice is left? Michael leaned into his limp, his jaw tight, his silence louder than words. Emma bent low beside the calf, pressing her forehead against its fragile hide, whispering, "We carry you because you carry us." The herd moaned, their cries thin, a chorus of survival fraying at the edges. Shadows rippled across the ground, vultures circling above, as though the sky prepared for failure. Emma rose, her eyes fierce, her body trembling but unbroken. She said quietly, almost to herself, "Not yet, not here." The plain shimmered with heat, a cruel mirage, yet they pressed forward. In that unbearable moment, the herd's survival was no longer choice, it was rebellion, carved in dust and blood. The afternoon wore into silence, every sound swallowed by heat and dust. Charlotte collapsed briefly, her sobs muffled by cracked hands over her face. James pulled her up roughly, his voice harsh. "If you stop, you die." Emma turned on him, her voice steel. "We all carry weakness, and we carry it together." Michael's gaze softened briefly at Emma's words, though his body trembled under weight of wounds. The calf staggered again, legs trembling, nearly falling, but Emma pressed forward, pulling with every shred of strength left. She whispered, "Stand, little one, stand." The herd followed blindly, instinct pulling them forward despite exhaustion. Above, the sun bled into orange, shadows stretching long across the plain. The world grew quieter still, as though waiting for their collapse. Survival had no kindness, no cruelty. It simply demanded, and they obeyed, step after step, breath after breath, until nothing remained but will. As night fell, the plain turned silver under moonlight, silence stretching endless. The herd settled in fragments, their bodies still, their eyes reflecting stars. Emma sat alone with the calf pressed against her, its breath shallow, its ribs sharp under her hand. James stood nearby, silent, his fists unclenched at last. Charlotte whispered into the night, "What if tomorrow takes us too?" Michael answered, his voice heavy, "Then we endure tonight." Emma's eyes met the horizon, her voice no louder than breath. Survival is not victory. It is the echo we leave behind. The calf stirred, lifting its head weakly, a fragile spark against vast darkness. In that moment, the weight of every loss, every fire, every storm, every predator burned into memory. The plain held its silence, eternal and absolute. The final truth remained. They endured, but not unscarred. And in the silence the echo lingered, haunting, unbroken, unforgettable.